Welcome to the Delighted Customers podcast. I am so excited to have Joe Davis on my show today. Let me tell you a little bit about Joe. Joe served as a senior partner at the Boston Consulting Group, one of the biggest, most respected consulting firms, consultancies in the world. Pulls from some of the best talent. And Joe spent 37 years there. He co-founded the Washington, D.C. office, and he started BCG's NA public sector business, North America, and led BCG North America. He founded and chaired BCG's Center for Inclusion and Equity. Joe, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Mark. Thanks. BCG would appreciate that nice introduction as much as I will. And after I was there 37 years, it means a lot to me, too.
Well, you're in good company because I know from my own experience that BCG pulls from some of the best schools, and you went to one of the best, Harvard Business School, and I'm excited to have you as a guest. But more importantly, what you did over your career is remarkable, and I love how you kind of crystallized some of those thoughts in your new book, The Generous Leader. What sort of a paradoxical name. You don't hear those two words going hand in hand very often. So I have to ask you, naming a book is hard. Typically, it happens after you write it. How'd you come up with that name?
You don't know me that well, but I always tell an honest story. So we, of course, had many efforts of finding the names. Actually, there's a purpose group within BCG that's quite creative. I said, hey, can you help me name my book? We had a lot of names, Caring, all kinds of stuff. And it's funny because the publisher I ended up with, these guys named BK, I was on video with a fellow. And I think whatever the title, I said, Joe, that's just boring. He goes, I got an idea. The Generous Leader, 7 ways to give of yourself for everyone's gain. It was pretty clever. There's 3 G's there. And, your reaction, now I see why publishers are good at their job. Because your reaction is, he said, you can call it Lead with Your Heart, The Caring. It doesn't matter. I want someone to notice it on the bookshelf so they buy it, which is very interesting. And it did get the reaction. We'll talk about it, but I think an exceptional leader is one who gives of themselves and helps others to grow to their full potential without expecting anything back. Of course, they get something back. Their team's humming. And that's one definition of generosity. So it actually is not a bad word.
No, I love the word, and in some ways it's counterintuitive because you're thinking, oftentimes we think about leading with control, and I think words like accountability and results and performance and everything. You're talking about generosity, so that's a bit paradoxical, isn't it?
Yes, it is. But and I also have to be careful. A leader still has to get results. I'm not saying that. You lose your job if you don't get results. That's as simple as that. But Joaquin Duato, the CEO of J&J, was talking to me. He said, Joe, the thing is, of course, a leader has to get outcomes. But the sooner they really realize that it's not about themselves, move past themselves and connect with all their team and unlock all the great human traits of their team, the sooner they will get to the best results. So, of course, and you said metrics. Yeah, if you don't have basic management skills, you're not going to be an exceptional leader. You won't get the chance. But then how do you go past being able to create metrics or set a goal and yelling at people? How do you actually get everybody to be inspired to want to go with you? I think generosity is not a bad word. Lead with the heart. You hear these words.
Well, and I would love to, as we dig into this, we'll peel back the layers and talk about what it means to be a generous leader and how some of these 7 ways play out in the real world. But before we do, what did you see? There's so many books on leadership out there. What did you see as a white space for this book?
Well, you raise a very good point. So I think a couple things. One, I do think you talked about the authoritarian leader, the Jack Welch of many years ago, who was a great leader, but also tough guy and all that. Right. I think those days are changing. And I think what we all expect something different, which we could talk about. And therefore, I think this kind of leadership matters. Try and encourage, my publisher said you can't pick that narrow, but 25 to 35-year-olds to think about bringing this kind of aspect into their leadership. But I saw a friend of mine, as I said, I told a colleague, I said, oh my gosh, who am I? And he said, Joe, if you move 8 people that that'll make a difference. And because those 8 will move, So I thought, all right, you don't have to touch millions of people to make a difference. So I will.
Well, just to affirm the concept at a high level is I've found, and I've had over 40 years of business experience at this point, that when I failed, it typically involved me getting in the way of myself and trying to do too much as a manager and trying to be too controlling and not giving it up. And I talk a lot today in the courses that I offer and what I teach at Michigan State are all about trust and building trust and how to be less self-oriented. And your book certainly hits on that. Why should the C-suite matter? I mean, the C-suite's thinking about outcomes in business, and they have a fiduciary responsibility to their shareholders to get outcomes. Why should they care about this idea of being a generous leader? And isn't that, after all soft, touchy-feely stuff?
Well, as I just said, I don't think it's all soft, touchy-feely, and we could talk about the 7 traits. But I mean, one example of a generous leader is someone who really helps you grow. So that means I might have to give you harsh feedback. You might not like it. But if it's meant coming from caring or generosity or your growth, that's massively generous, even though it might hurt. So, you got to be really careful what you think about it. Now, your point on the C-suite, I mean, there's some other, I think an incredible leader like this listens very well and is empathetic to where the other person's coming from. The C-suite knows you have to behave a lot of these ways because they can't do it all. If you're a brand new leader and you have 3 people, you said this a minute ago, I don't trust them. I'll just stay up all night myself and get it done. That might work when you get tired, but it might work when you have 3 people. When you have 10 people and 30 people, it don't work no more. So now how are you going to get them to work at their best and you can't bark orders because eventually the best say, I won't use swear words, but they'll say, yeah, good luck, buddy. I quit. If that's the way you're going to treat me, I'm out of here. So it was funny because I was kind of surprised because people say what you ask that question, but when the C-suite people I interviewed, and I'm sure you see the same, they embodied more of these characteristics than a new person does. And I think it's because they say, hey, I got to motivate 100,000 people. I can't do that by barking orders from the 18th floor. I got to build this culture right down through the organization. Now, I know there's some leaders in the world today that kind of work that way. We could name their names, but I also know that people don't work in those companies. They go in, stay a while, and churn right out.
Joe, as you're talking, you triggered a thought and really sort of a quote that I heard from someone once, which was 9 times out of 10, when people bring in consultants in to solve a problem, the problem they share with the consultants they want solved is typically not the problem they end up solving. And how much of the time did you find that true, number one, in your world at Boston Consulting Group? And 2 is how much of the solution ends up evolving around the 7 things that people can do in generous leadership?
I remember one time, a very senior guy around the Boston office when I started, someone asked us to come in. He started giving a pitch. He said, but I got to tell you guys, you have the wrong question. You got the wrong problem. We should be working on this. If you want us to work on that, don't hire us. We'll work on this. Guess who they hired? They hired us. Now he was smart and he was right. But I do think what does happen is people don't understand holistically maybe the problem they're dealing with, right? They think, I need, and it might be that I need to, this plant's got a safety record. Well, is it your processes or is it maybe your management? I mean, you don't know even what the problem is. They'll have an assumption, but if they're bringing in a consultant, they probably want to make sure, okay, someone better look at all the angles here and come up with the right answer. Now, your point about the 7 traits, I think one of the most important things in there is, I say listening to learn, listening with curiosity. Or in my business, I used to tell my teams, engage the skeptics, uncover the no's. You got to solve the no's if you're going to solve the problem. And that is pretty typical if you're trying to drive change in an organization. Where are those people that think I'm crazy? They probably have some real reason to think it. They're not just trying to block. They have something they know that I don't know.
That's a great point. I think anyone who's tried to lead change of any kind has dealt with skeptics. Can you think of a time when you've dealt with a skeptic on the consultant side of this within a client of yours where you could tell maybe they don't trust me, maybe they're skeptical about what I'm bringing to the table as a solution? Does anything come to mind for you where you had to deal with a skeptic?
What I was thinking when you first started out, what's a specific example? Then when you finished it, I mean, always inside an organization, especially if you're bringing in BCG or there are skeptics. Someone wanted you, but a lot of other executives didn't want you. So there's a lot of skeptics. And if you're looking at the marketing department because the CEO wants you to, well, the marketing department's saying, "What the hell are you doing here?" I could think of one. This is a funny story, but we did some work for Sheila Bair. So it's a little different than skeptic. But after the 2008 crash, and she worked for the FDIC, or she was the head of the FDIC, bailing out banks with yours and my money. And we did some work with the finance team there. And they had the structure such that it was great for the banks like Wells Fargo, who was buying, taking over Washington Mutual. It wasn't great for you and me as a taxpayer. Now, their goal was to get the banks, keep them in place and all that, but they'd gone too far on the quote unquote generosity. I remember we laid this out with the finance team there, who were damn smart, and they were not happy. They were, they're skeptical, your math. They also were going to challenge what they'd done. But I remember when we presented to Sheila Bair, and the CFO was in the room, she was stunned. She turned around and said, "Is this right?" He said, "Well, yeah, it is right." She said, "Okay, well, let's change it now." But if, you as the consultant or whatever, the advisor, has to stick to your guns, then you've got to have the right data. And ultimately, if you bring the right analysis and the right, facts and figures or whatever it might be, they get it. They'll agree. The other thing I think is the 7 things, is this whole idea of communicate. That's something if you're trying to drive change, when you set it triggered, I just watch the best organizations. They understand if they really got it done. You can do all the thinking, you can do all the planning, you can do all the blah, blah. If you aren't communicating this constantly and in ways that people hear it and over, good luck to you, good luck to you. And part of the communication is, asking for engagements, right? Because then you find those skeptics. Sorry, that was a long answer. I apologize for that.
Well, that's a great point. So you just said really at least 3 things relative to communication. Number 1, communication is important. Number 2 is you need to do it over and over again. So it's like a constant drumbeat. And I want to double tap on that. You said you do need to do it the right way, right? Make sure you're doing it to the right people.
The way they hear it.
And you've got to also get feedback from the field, the people involved as well. So let's break that one down a little bit, like examples of listening. How do you hear the feedback?
Well, I tell you a story. Then another CEO was telling me he has a large organization and he wants to make sure that he says words, but are people hearing the words or what he means in his words? And he actually does 2 things quickly. He'll have an executive maybe a few levels down, someone he trusts and knows, and he'll ask them, "Hey, sir, my friend, what are they saying I'm saying?" And this guy, head of J&J, said, "Oh, well, Joaquin, they're telling you that, they think you just want to cut costs." So I never said that. I said I wanted to streamline this matrix, this very matrix, and try to make things more effective and more efficient. Yeah, that's what I told you. You want to cut costs. So he really didn't want to cut costs. I mean, of course, everyone wants to be effective, but it was so matrixed. And he said, "Wow, they are not hearing my word." There's a friend of his said, "Buddy, you just said it twice." He said, "I know." I said, he also, it's funny, he said before he does a major, like a video or, a town hall type of thing, he'll bring in a small group of people and do it. And he'll say to them, "So what did you hear?" And he might say the word TV and they heard the word video. So he'll write down the words they heard, not the words he said, and change it to their words. Or he'll say, "Well, if you were home at night at dinner and said, what did the CEO say? What's the story you tell your family around the dinner table?" And that was very powerful. He said, "Oh, I thought I said this and they heard that." So he took the time when it's important to check himself. So I think the thing in all of that, when you said, "Did you hear? What are they hearing?" is you just got to ask questions over and over and over. I mean, every executive I interviewed for that book said, "Joe, I like to ask and ask and ask." And the more junior, the less tenured, the better. Your guys around you may or may not tell you everything, because they're protecting their own job or whatever.
So thanks, Joe. I appreciate that. I don't think really we can say enough about the importance of communication and how we can easily assume that we've done just enough of it. And boy, that would be a misstep, wouldn't it?
I have one other story. I believe in tell things 3 times. Partly because the first time they hear it, but they wonder what's really going on here. The second time they're thinking about how their kid fell down last night and scraped his knee, so not listening. And the third time they might engage. More interesting, I told that somebody, they said, "Oh, I was watching the Olympic figure skating dancers, and the judges said, no, or whoever the TV guy said, no, watch, the Russian group does the same move 3 times. Because the same reason, the first time the judges said, "Whoa, what was that?" Because they've never seen it. Second time, and the third time they said, "Wow, that was really different." So they do the exact same move, communicate it 3 times, so their audience actually hears, in that case, sees what they did. That was very interesting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 100%. Love that story. And there's a good message there about repeating an important message, because people might not be 100% plugged in, or they might be hearing it a different way.
Right.
when you first say it. What other of the 7, can you share another one, strategy for us on how to be a generous leader?
I do think another one that's important is, bringing your human self a little bit to work. I mean, people nowadays with work-life blur and technology and all this, people don't want to be just a cog in the wheel. They want to bring their humanity. So I think this whole idea of whether you want to use the word vulnerability, honesty, humbleness, authenticity, I don't care. Use the word you like. But the fact is, I think our people nowadays need to see more of that. It's also, though, quite effective. I have a friend of mine, asked him, a colleague at BCG, when did you kind of step across your line and get yourself more vulnerable and you were comfortable? And he told me a story. He said, Joe, I used to be, or always was afraid to say, I don't know. If I was in the room with a team and I could tell they're getting stuck and they were going to turn to me, I would leave the room before I'd get the question. How productive is that? He says, and finally I thought, this is ridiculous. They're just staying stuck in there. So he said, I stayed in the room and they turned to me, of course. And he said, you guys, I don't know either. He said, it was amazing. Oh, wow, the boss doesn't know. We don't know. It's okay not to know. And let's brainstorm what, the creative juices just unleashed. And I think so, people, being vulnerable, you're just trying to be nice. No, you're trying to unblock others, allow them to connect with you, in a sense, show them you're human too and you respect them. But really, you're allowing them to move past roadblocks. You're helping them too. And that one, I think, is quite powerful. And it gets a bad rap because people think it just means cry on the TV screen. You don't have to cry on the TV. You can do that if you want, but you don't have to do that.
Yeah, just be real. Don't be afraid to be real and vulnerable. And I think you become more relatable.
Yeah. And you don't have to be lost. Some go, well, but don't you have to be in charge? Yeah. You can say, I don't know, and let's brainstorm 3 ways to get there. That sounds like you're in charge.
Right.
Alex Gorski, the CEO of J&J, said, I listened to him at some conference. He said, the leader isn't supposed to be bring the answer and have the answer in the room or be the smartest person in the room. They're supposed to be the one to get the smartest answer out of the room. Tap into the team, which you alluded to something earlier, that same kind of comment on how the leader, you said not the smartest person in the room necessarily.
Yeah, I love that. So leader certainly shouldn't be coming across as the smartest person in the room. That's a good way to get everybody else to shut up.
Yep.
And withdraw, right? But to bring out the best in others so that you get the best answer or outcome.
If you want, I talked about one other characteristic that I kind of like that's easier. And it's just simply small acts have big impact. You remember when you're in kindergarten, maybe you don't, but the teacher put the gold star on your paper. Your paper could have been terrible, but it was a small act that motivated and inspired you, Now that's kindergarten. But even as a grown-up, how often do you love it when you get an email that says, job well done, thank you? It's just an email. And I was talking to a friend of mine once, and she was a mom. She goes, yeah, my kid got an email like that. And we talked about it at dinner all night. We all dissected. We were all so proud of her, and she was so proud of herself. If she had said, hey, I got a raise today, so, oh, good, honey, how much? Here they were just engaged. So simple, small acts that show people you're connecting with them, you care about them, congratulating, job well done. It's really powerful. Another friend of mine told me, she said if she says something to the boss, like on a Friday, hey, my son's got a soccer tournament this weekend. It's going to be a big weekend for us. Okay, soccer, whatever. But if he or she on Monday or Tuesday come back and say, oh, by the way, how was that soccer tournament? She goes, I am just thrilled. He remembered. They asked. I'm going to follow that person forever in the context of work. And that took what? You had to remember, so it took 30 seconds. And that person was motivated forever to team with that boss, that man.
I think that's such a good point. I want to double tap on that if I could. This idea of listening, because listening was one of the things you shared in the realm of communication. And if you could, I know it's hard, especially if you manage a lot of people or you're interacting with so many people, you've got so much on your plate to try and remember all this. But if someone says something like, if you could listen for the part of it that connects to them emotionally, right? Like I've got this kid's soccer game. Maybe they say something about it. It's a big game, or it means a lot to him or her, whatever. And then you can make a mental note to circle back, as you shared in this story. What a big impact. It shows you're not self-oriented. It shows maybe actually you do care about them.
I like the way you put that, maybe actually.
Yeah, and you were really listening. And how many other people, these are small acts, but they make a big difference, because how many people actually do that?
Yeah. No, I think I think better leaders do it. Less better leaders don't, And I'll tell you, Scott Kirby, the CEO of United, told me a story. He said his wife was on the plane after COVID, and the captain came out and said, "Oh, Mrs. Kirby, I'm so excited to see you." And she said, "I just love your husband." That's the CEO, She goes, "Oh, why?" And it was a black female captain. And she said, "Your husband called every captain of color after the George Floyd murder just to check in. Didn't have answers, wasn't going to tell us what, just said, how you doing?" And that takes a little bit of work, probably less than he wished. But he didn't have to do anything other than call. And she was so committed to United and to Scott Kirby because he knew they're in a vulnerable moment, and I'll just check in. And it's a little bit bigger act, but it's pretty simple, very.
So another important gem there I want to tap into is you don't have to have all the answers. Just the idea of checking in and saying how you doing or what's going on means a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. I actually think when you said that, well, it's just like the story I told, that manager, when he said he didn't have all the answers, actually his team became energized. But I think sometimes another executive was saying, Scott Kirby said during COVID, during the pandemic, he was going to get on the video and tell, town hall to all, whatever, thousands of people, "I'm not sure when we're going to fly again." And his team said, "Well, you can't say that. You're the CEO. You have to have all the answers." Now, in this case, what are you guys talking about? I don't know when we're going to fly again. But you don't want to get up there and say, "Hey, I don't know what's going to happen." But he does want, "I don't know when we're going to fly again, but here's what we're going to do in the meantime." So you're in charge, but you're admitting you're also not full of all the answers. It's just people are attracted to that.
I love these stories. Let's go back to the word generous when it comes to this. When you think of it, I know then you just shared at the top of the show where the name came from and how it came about. But when you think about that word, what do you want to tell leaders who are listening to this show right now about how they can begin to think of themselves as generous?
I think that's a good way to ask that question. It really is, you've learned a lot. You have a lot of expertise, skills, capabilities, whatever, knowledge, experience. Share it. That's the generous part. Share it. Don't you want them? And share it to others so they can grow and develop and be, thrive at their full potential. That's the generous part. Now, you'd say, well, that's what a leader's supposed to do. Okay, be a generous leader. Share and grow your people. That's what I think sometimes, but you got to do this, and that means feedback and all kinds of things. But that's what I think is when I really think of that. Because you want your team humming. And if you share it, not with expectation of, it's all about me, but it's all about you growing, they'll follow it. If it's all about you just want to say how great you are, good luck to you.
So that's a great delineation, because when you first started talking about share it, my mind jumped to, well, I'm going to share all that I know about X, Y, and Z and share technical information and so forth. But really what you're saying is share the model of a leader based on what you learn and incorporate the things that are in your book, which you talked about, things like communication and listening and these other things.
Yeah. No, you're sharing it. So, what you are doing is enable them to be better at their job. So what part of what I know should I share right now with it? Hey, I once did that, and man, it really went sideways for me. Let me tell you what I did, or let me tell you how I got out of it, or what a mentor coached me. That's really leadership.
Oh, it's so much more valuable, right? If you may have the answer, but it's better if you help them come to the answer than for you to just give them the answer.
I think we all remember the best teachers or the ones that weren't the most boring, the ones that weren't lectured to you. Let me go. And that was the end of the class. Did you get all my notes? Yeah, I guess so. I don't know. You just droned on for 50 minutes as opposed to the give and take.
What do you think? I mentioned at the top also that BCG is one of the most respected and greatest consulting brands ever. I remember reading about, it might have been 20 years ago, I was going back for my master's, my MBA, and we read case studies that included BCG and so forth. But when you think about what they look for in an employee to be a member of their team as a consultant, what are some of the top attributes that they look for?
So, one, I'll use the word curiosity, but someone who's curious to collect data, and in BCG's context with data and all that, but with data. So curiosity to get to the deepest insight, curiosity to learn, curiosity to understand why does this work this way and how could it work, a different way if it needs to. That's critical. The second thing that's critical is resilience or grit. I mean, we watch all of those who make it to partner. There's a lot of punches along the way. It's a tough place. It's those who have resilience. I screwed up. I learned from it. I'll do this, or man, I did. That's quite important. And then the other thing that's quite important is, but it's harder to get in the interviews, but someone who gets out of their own head, because you can't be curious. I guess that goes with curiosity, but someone, maybe that's the point.
Yeah.
If you be a stubborn thinker, you're not going to get through the interview rounds because that's just not going to work. It's the one thing in consulting, but probably in a lot of industry, the thing you have least of is time, right? I mean, you can make something, you can go find research, but you got to, the time, because clients are pushing you, hey, I want to make the change. So that's what I'd say. I'd say curiosity in all its elements, being out of your own head, which is curiosity version, and resilience and grit are, that's what I'd say.
Speaking of curiosity, you have me curious about the kind of work that you're doing these days at BCG. I know you said you were in an advisory role. What's the kind of work that you're doing with them now?
I just actually had a wonderful 2 days earlier this week, just coaching the group of people that are principals and partners, we call them, one step below managing director, on just these type of things. How do you connect best with your teams? How do you connect best with your client? How do you motivate, inspire? How do you get out? Because there's a transition where you get out of the math curiosity or the analytic curiosity, and you have to connect with clients. When we talked about driving change, get the answer, but now you got to get it done, and that's a little different. So that's the stuff I'm doing mostly with people. It's a lot of coaching, whether it's formal like that or one-on-one, which I love.
All right. So if you're listening to the Delighted Customers podcast right now, you just got a whole bunch of free wisdom that is being taught to some of the up and coming, some of the rising best and brightest talent at BCG, and you got it on the Delighted Customers podcast. Thank you, Joe.
Thank you, Mark.
I have one last question I want to ask you, which I ask all my guests, which is, what delights you as a customer?
It's a wonderful question. Two things. I like going out to eat. And I like the ambience of a restaurant delights me. I don't know if the food's important, but most importantly is that service person and the team. So they feel like they want me there. They don't become my best friend, but they connect with me. Of course, they meet you, I need a new fork or whatever, but it's really, are they making me feel like, you belong here, we want you, we're going to make sure you have the best darn meal of your life? That delights me. Or, I was thinking, even if it took it harder, if you're buying a new car, do you walk out and say, hey, that was a pretty damn good experience? Or it could be a used car. Now that's tough, but I've had one person who made me feel really good, and they also followed up with me, and of course they're trying to sell the next car, but it didn't feel like it. Now that's hard. But, that's what I want. I want to feel good that I was there. And somehow I felt like they wanted me there, not just my mind.
Yeah, I think so many of us are in the same boat as you described it. We want to feel special. We want to feel like someone really cares about us.
Yeah, even in that meal in the restaurant. Otherwise, I guess you can eat, but you can eat anywhere.
Yeah, great example. It has been an incredible delight to have you on the show. The name of the book is called The Generous Leader. And Joe, if people want to get a hold of you, where will be the best way for them to reach you?
Well, if you want to reach me, the best thing is go on to LinkedIn, Joe Davis, BCG or whatever. And if you leave a message, I will respond. I will then give you my email because I'd rather communicate over email than. Or I have a website, joedavis.com. You can learn more about me, and there's a contact thing. But I would just go to LinkedIn and leave me a message. I've now learned to watch and check. I didn't used to check. Now I check.
Joe, thank you so much. It's been so much fun. Thanks for your wisdom, and thanks for being a guest on the Delighted Customers podcast.
Thank you, Mark. This was fun.